¿Saben quién es este, iba a decir señor, este individuo? ¿Lo reconocen? Pues quizá algunos de ustedes no lo reconozcan. Y ahora, ¿saben a qué me refiero? ¿A quién me refiero? Por decir algo. Pues este señor jugó con la vida de muchas personas, las sacrificó y las asesinó. Con el beneplácito de las autoridades políticas, con el beneplácito, con la complacencia y con el reconocimiento de las autoridades políticas de aquel momento. ¿Qué tiene que ver esto con la actualidad, 2023? ¿Hay alguien que pueda seguir haciendo esto en el 2023? ¿Hay alguien que pueda jugar con la salud y la vida de las personas, de la humanidad, en el 2023? Pero yo afirmo que sí, y se lo voy a demostrar. Y además, con una diferencia, que las que yo les voy a enseñar, que son las cabezas visibles, no han sido elegidas democráticamente, ni ellos ni los que los mandan. Y para esto me voy a basar hoy en una entrevista, un fragmento de una entrevista que para mí es histórica, una entrevista que es histórica, de Robert Kennedy Jr. a Dane Wilkinson. Les pondré esta entrevista de unos 8 o 10 minutos y la voy a cortar brevemente para hacer unas incisiones y algunas explicaciones para mejor entendimiento de lo que están diciendo. Y después haré una breve conclusión. Pues nada más. Allá vamos.
Do not show aluminum migrating across the ocean. Mercury can, of course, because it converts to a gaseous state, but not aluminum. So where is that much metal coming from? And a final note, your viewers, your followers, can watch the world's most recognized geoengineer, Dr. David Keith, who works for Mr. Gates, works with Mr. Gates, works for Harvard as well.
It's about the fact, an uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact, that we have the technical ability to do this. They are all fast-acting, they are cheap, and they are fundamentally imperfect.
O sea que están experimentando con la atmósfera, que es de nuestra propiedad, de una manera muy económica, cosa que a muchos les extraña, porque dicen, esto de la geoingeniería, de la geojardinería debe ser carísimo, ¿no? Y esto no se puede costear. Pues sí, resulta que se puede costear, que lo tienen controlado y además que produce efectos impredecibles y, claro, mucha gente puede ser perjudicada, es decir, que están jugando con una cosa que desconocen su funcionamiento.
There are problems of how you control something where an individual country can have tremendous leverage over the whole planet's climate, and where there are winners and losers in ways that really could be unpredictable. And I mean, not to frighten you, but I think you can imagine scenarios that lead to war.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change.
La excusa es revertir el calentamiento global. Y ahora yo les hago una pregunta de lo más lógica que no hace falta ir a estudiar a Harvard. Si están aplicando una terapia para reducir la temperatura del planeta y lo que están provocando, según ellos, es que la temperatura aumente, díganme ustedes, si fueran directores de una empresa, ¿qué harían con estos resultados? Pues quitarían este proyecto, porque si un proyecto que se hace para ganar más dinero resulta que pierde dinero, pues lo retiran, ¿no? Pero ellos dicen que es para reducir la temperatura del planeta, y lo que hacen es aumentarla. ¿No será que lo que les interesa sea esto?
One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
There's all sorts of ways you could do this, but the standard idea has always been spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere, 20 kilometers over our head, and use that to stop the planet warming up.
The example many people cite was when the Mount Pinatubo volcano exploded. And all of this ash went into the air and had a cooling effect on the Earth.
And so people have long proposed, since the mid-60s, that you could artificially add dust to the stratosphere and cool the planet.
Esto del volcán Pinatubo es una excusa perfecta, porque el volcán Pinatubo sí que hizo disminuir las temperaturas. Por ellos, con la excusa del volcán, aplican su geojardinería y lo que provocan es un aumento de temperatura.
Not that this would be a good solution for global warming, it would not. But it does show the way we're steadily developing the powers to manipulate the planet with comparative ease. That sulfur in the lower atmosphere is masking some of the climate warming from CO2. So
is this the global dimming or something?
Yeah.
Their leading idea is basically to emulate what big volcanoes do, put material in the stratosphere to reflect sunlight.
So the problem is the following. If you add SO2 to the stratosphere, SO2 doesn't condense. So you might want to put alumina in. Alumina has a very high initial refraction. It's very small. It doesn't coagulate. And you could engineer particles that have particular properties. You can get them above the stratosphere. You can concentrate particles near the poles. Costs are so cheap that the richest people on the planet could perhaps afford to buy an ice age. It's extraordinarily cheap. I knew it was cheap when I found that they were quoting me in tons. It's also true that particles, as they get bigger, fall out a lot faster. We sort of stepped back and thought, okay, well, how would you actually make particles in the stratosphere? This is really engineering now. If it was aerosols in the stratosphere, it would likely be put there by airplanes. Start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets. The basic idea is that if you let a plume off in an aircraft by just changing some little details, you can actually get much smaller particle size distributions by doing this kind of spraying. So there are all sorts of side effects. I'll get to them in a second. But if you put sulfuric acid in the stratosphere, for example, you could deplete stratospheric ozone.
O sea que si vierten ácido sulfúrico a la atmósfera, que produce azufre, óxido de azufre, disminuyen la capa de ozono. ¿Se acuerdan del vídeo que hice sobre la capa de ozono? Que los datos a pie al nivel de tierra no coinciden con los oficiales de la NOAA y de la NASA. Está llegando la radiación ultravioleta de onda corta a la superficie terrestre y estos señores tienen la culpa y lo está reconociendo.
Smaller size means more surface area, but more surface area means less ozone.
Is the stuff in the stratosphere going to be killing some number of people that are going to be sacrificed?
It's an obvious
Y ahora, ustedes mismos califiquen la reacción de este individuo cuando le dicen que esto va a matar mucha gente.
So if it kills 1 million people and we're only doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here.
O sea que su respuesta es que el locutor ha hecho una buena regla de 3 y sabe matemáticas, pero ninguna mención a disculparse o rectificar el experimento porque esto pueda matar mucha gente. Esto es, en fin, no lo califico de momento.
So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say, you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that decision.
And so the only thing that we can do to cool the planet, or that society can do to cool the planet, is deploy these sorts of technologies.
And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids. It's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids. It's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids.
And it means there are going to be winners and losers, just like there are winners and losers for CO2, but they're different winners and losers. So this makes the problem, if anything, harder to solve. You've introduced another dimension of complexity into the managing the planet's climate problem.
The world's most recognized geoengineer at an international geoengineering conference, presenting his proposal to put 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum nanoparticles into the atmosphere annually. And on film, on the same footage, which is on the Dimming documentary, I confronted Dr. Keith at that presentation, at that conference, asking him, had any toxicological studies been done whatsoever on these particles? His first response was, well, we studied the amount of atmospheric aerosol particulate loading, paraphrase, there's a lot of material or a lot of particles up there, a few more won't hurt. And before they cut me off, I followed up with, those particles aren't aluminum. Have you studied aluminum? And what the world's most recognized geoengineers said, no, could terrible things happen tomorrow? We don't know. Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere? In particular, small particles of aluminum. We, in our climate model, we looked at how much additional acid rain, acid snow you would get from the sulfur coming out of the stratosphere if you did it at a rate of 5 megatons per year or 10 megatons per year of sulfate. And it turns out that amount is so much smaller than what humans put into the troposphere on an annual basis by burning fossil fuels as a byproduct, that even in pristine areas, the soil would have a buffering capacity and it wouldn't be harmful.
Aquí este señor, por muy enterado que esté, está metiendo la pata y está cometiendo un error deliberado. Porque, que yo sepa, los humanos no lanzamos aluminio a la atmósfera. Puede que lancemos azufre, pero aluminio no. De manera que no comparemos una cosa con otra.
So the collaborators in my working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie.
Como han oído ustedes, los que se encargan de estudiar esto son de los de Carnegie Mellon. ¿Qué es esto de Carnegie Mellon? Los que le facilitan los datos y los que lo estudian. Pues vamos a ver quiénes son estos que lo estudian y que le facilitan todos estos datos, o la equiscencia de lo que están haciendo. Pues miren, estos de Carnegie Mellon es una universidad y he hecho una investigación que me ha durado 1 minuto y medio. Mirar esta universidad y mirar cuál es la subvención que reciben. Y si ustedes lo hacen, pues se encontrarán con esto y con otras cosas. Carnegie Mellon University recibe 2.000 millones, porque en inglés ponen 2 billones, 2.000 millones de dólares, un récord en cuanto a filántropos que dan dinero para esta universidad haga sus investigaciones. Y en estas investigaciones que hace esta universidad de geojardinería, todavía no han estudiado el impacto del aluminio sobre la salud humana. Y no es que no tengan dinero, ¿eh? ¿Y quién es que les da este dinero? Pues no hace falta investigar mucho. Pues apretan en internet y verán Carnegie Mellon, tal, Bill y Melinda Gates, aquí en un día no sé cuánto, les dieron 20 millones de dólares para que investiguen esto de la geoingeniería. Y estos no tienen dinero para hacer un análisis de estos compuestos que tienen en la atmósfera, a ver la cantidad de aluminio que tienen y hacer unas pruebas experimentales como el doctor Mengele, que cojan unos voluntarios y les hagan respirar estas partículas a ver qué pasa. Pues no, pues para esto no tienen financiación.
Now we've focused on human health impacts, and while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in the federal pencil paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And the answer is no, clear-cut no. So for the numbers of particles burning in the stratosphere are so tiny compared to the loadings on human health.
Es decir, este angelito hace una regla de 3 y dice, como hay muchas partículas en la atmósfera, pues unas cuantas partículas más, y estas partículas no producen efectos sobre la salud, pues unas cuantas partículas más no le va a producir. Pero, y además reconoce que no ha estudiado los efectos sobre la salud del aluminio y de estas partículas.
There are other things that worry me a lot, like the rain on these particles in the upper troposphere, when they might affect high clouds. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
So 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere will have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. We're to separate out the toxicological, but so the aluminum we've only begun to research and publish nothing. The question I was asking was purely about particle number density. So what we did is we said, we looked at some global estimates now we have of aerosol, global estimates that were built for epidemiological purposes of the global loading of aerosols in terms of health impacts. And we said if we added on top of that what we're doing from the stratospheric aerosols, could it have any impact? And the answer is that was totally irrelevant. But that was just on particle number. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
we haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
They banned me from the subsequent conferences for asking that question.
Yeah, I mean, the ironic thing about Gates is that Gates has, and I've documented this in my book and in a bunch of articles, he has these huge, these vast investments in carbon industries, in the coal industry, in most of the big oil companies. He had when I was, when I last researched this, and I'm not sure it's still true, but I know there's no reason to believe that it isn't, but he owned manufacturing facilities for private airplanes or maintenance facilities for he had a private airplane company. He owns a big stake in the railroads, and I think about 20% of rail, and I could be wrong about this, but it's going to be close. About 20% of railroad revenues, I think, come from carrying coal. And so he has a portfolio that is very, very heavily carbon. Of course, he flies private everywhere, and he's to Davos, as they all do. So he doesn't seem particularly concerned about global warming. And I was in the environmental movement for 40 years. I didn't work directly on climate because I mainly focused on pollution issues, which are related because they're coming from the same factories, and for the same power plants and cement kilns, et cetera. But I was working for organizations like NRDC, which were very heavily involved in climate. And Gates never contributed to these organizations. He was not contributing to climate advocacy like maybe, some of the other, like Ted Turner and Bloomberg and the other people who talk about climate a lot. They were giving money to people who were advocating for, laws to end subsidies to the carbon industry and these kind of things. But Gates really was never involved in doing those things. So his involvement in, then he goes ahead and writes a book on climate this year, and he starts pretending that he's a big climate activist, but he's never been involved in climate activism. The only thing that he's been involved in is, as far as I know, is funding these big geoengineering projects that seem just insane. And, my whole life I've been, a lot of what I do is fighting people who are trying to impose engineering solutions on environmental problems. God designed the planet to work pretty well, and usually trying to fix it with an engineering solution, it's like whack-a-mole. It just causes more problems down the line. And if you're going to do a big large-scale engineering solution, dams, dikes, lakes, etc., you better look at all of the unanticipated results of that. All they're thinking is, we have a problem. Here's an engineering solution. Don't ask me about any of the collateral damage from that solution. And that, it seems insane that somebody would sprinkle aluminum dust into the atmosphere, which we know is deadly toxic to the human brain.
We've been dealing a lot with some military activity in terms of chaff anyway, and that's something that I experienced for the first time yesterday. That was a whole lot of fun. And that's where the military just basically dumps some of the tiny particles of plastic or metal, mylar, into the atmosphere.
And when you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum.
Then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
Hay un detalle en la traducción que no habrá quedado claro cuando hablan de partículas, de micropartículas de plástico. No se dedican a tirar plástico a la atmósfera. Esto se refiere a los polímeros, y a veces se mal traduce polímeros de plástico. Un polímero no es más que una molécula larga, una cadena carbonosa larga. Estas fibras, estas microfibras, una de las cosas que hacen es la nucleación de estas partículas, que hace que estos filamentos tengan más rozamiento, y como el plancton del mar, pues también hacen filamentos y formas asimétricas, y a veces se enganchan las diatomeas unas con otras para dificultar su descenso y permanecer más tiempo en la zona fótica, en la zona que hay luz, para hacer la fotosíntesis. Estos utilizan el mismo procedimiento. Estas micropartículas supermicroscópicas se unen a estos polímeros y permanecen más tiempo en el aire, con lo cual rinden mucho más y tienen mucho más eficacia, entre comillas, su experimento. ¿Cuál es la conclusión? Pues ustedes pueden sacar ustedes mismos la conclusión, que es lo que les decía al principio del vídeo. Ahora, lo que estoy haciendo, que pienso que es útil para usted y para la humanidad, resulta que en la legislación actual ya creo que ya está puesto, que el discrepar en estos asuntos sobre la autoridad establecida, no votada, sino establecida, que ellos mismos se han establecido, se puede considerar un delito de odio y te pueden meter en la cárcel o te puede pasar cualquier cosa. ¿Entienden? Pues por aquí van las cosas. De manera que si alguien duda de que se practique la geoingeniería o geojardinería, y que esta geojardinería la practican sobre un dominio nuestro de la humanidad, que es la atmósfera. Lo mismo que si ustedes viniera alguien en su jardín y se fuera, como uno ocupa, que se mete en su casa, se mete en su jardín y allí siembra, en su finca siembra lo que quiere, recoge lo que quiere y se la deja completamente contaminada. Y usted no puede hacer nada, simplemente aplaudirlos. Pues ¿qué podemos hacer con esta gente, señores? Por hacer lo que hacíamos cuando nos inyectaron aquellas cosas, no. Salir al balcón a las 7 de la tarde y aplaudirlos. Pues nada más, mientras esta gente estén aquí donde están y no los echemos fuera, ellos nos van a echar fuera a nosotros o nos van a meter en el cementerio o alguna enfermedad rara de estas debido a estas sustancias. Nada más y buenos días.